I welcome everybody. We're going to talk about lighting for themed environments today. That includes from theme parks all the way through some theme shows, parades, all kinds of things. So we have three presenters today. Jen Goldstein, can you wave at the camera? There's Jen. And Pat Gallegos. There's Pat. And Brian Gale.
Yeah.
It's Brian Gale. So we're going to start out with asking the presenters how they started in the theater and how they got to be where they are, like how they transitioned. So let's start with Jen.
Hi, so let's see. I started out, I went to UC Irvine for graduate school for lighting design after spending a lot of my undergrad designing, as I'm sure everyone here has if they went to undergrad. And then I was very, very fortunate to get a job at Visual Terrain in Los Angeles with Lisa Pasamonte, who I believe has been on some of the calls. And through that, she brought me in on a lot of the Universal projects. I think the first one I did was the King Kong ride. We worked on some World's Fair projects, and that's really how I got my toes wet. Following that, I used that experience to pick up the job at Imagineering, where I was for a year and got to work with Paula and lots of wonderful people, and finally landed here at Radiance Lightworks, where we do a lot of theme park design, mostly for Universal, but we also do a lot of walkthrough attractions and interactive and VR projects that aren't necessarily theme park, but kind of cross over into that world.
Okay, let's see, Brian?
Hi there. I was going to school in the theater department at Cal Poly Pomona, and our theater technician, I ran the theater, had a job at Disneyland. And I gravitated out of acting and performing into tech. So I was one of his, main techs in the shop. And I came in one day and he says, "You're going down to Disneyland tomorrow to apply for a job. Don't screw it up because I recommended you and my best friend. We went down and applied together. And I had hair down to here. And I applied. I went and had the interview, and the guy says, "You start tonight on grad nights." So I had to go home and get a haircut. And I started grad nights at Disneyland in 1976. And I worked at Disneyland for about 10 years, and I became their lighting guy. Meanwhile, while I was their lighting guy, doing all of the performance stages at Disneyland, I was also designing in regional theater and South Coast rep and Seattle rep so I was a theater lighting designer, trained theater lighting designer doing themed entertainment lighting at Disneyland. And about 10 years into that, when I was at Disneyland, we designed Imagineering came in and they wanted to demolish our stage, which was attached to Space Mountain. And build us a new one. So since I was the lighting guy, I worked with Imagineers to design the Videopolis stage over by Small World. So I met all the WDI people there. And during that, Imagineering, which at the time, show lighting was like Paula and Ed and Joe, and there were like 4 people in all of show lighting. And I think Pat was there. I can't remember. But so they were going to build a nighttime complex in Florida, and they needed somebody who's a little current on entertainment lighting. So they offered me a job to switch from Disneyland to Imagineering, which I did. And my first project was the Pleasure Island project. And then I stayed at Imagineering for another 14 years. And my specialty was doing entertainment and theatrical type shows within the Imagineering environment. And when I was at some point, Paul, if I remember, we were 21 or 22 lighting designers all in one building during the height of it. And all but one of them were theatrically trained lighting designers. We always thought it was easier to teach a theatrical lighting designer architectural fixtures than teaching an architectural lighting designer how to tell stories and collaborate and do all that. So and I spent 24 years in Imagineering. And since then, I'm still consulting back to various parts of Disney Company and as well as others. And that's my technical director at Cal Poly Pomona got me into the business.
Great. Thank you. Pat?
I got into theater by an interesting route. In college, I was actually in a Catholic seminary. I was going to become a priest. I could be Pope by now. So as part of that, I got interested in liturgy, which is the creation of liturgical services. And I grew up Catholic in the 50s and 60s, which was in the days of all the pomp and circumstance. And if you take the religious element out of it, it was a lot of fun. You had special effects because, you know, you had the incense and you had candles and you had the costumes. And if you think about it strictly in that sense, it was very theatrical. So I said, okay, I'm gonna bring kind of theater, and I did a little bit of theater in high school, not very much. And I said, I'm gonna get involved with our local theater group. My degree was actually in English literature, and it was my junior year of college. And I said, I'm gonna get involved with the theater group, and I got involved with that. To make a long story short, the theater kind of became my religion, and I found the community I was kind of looking for in one area became the community that I found in theater. So I worked doing odd jobs. I was always a fairly handy guy, so I painted scenery and built sets and whatever anybody said, do this kind of stuff. Then I came in early the following year, which was my senior year in college, and talking to the technical director, he said, "Hey, what are you doing?" I says, "Well, I'm making up the production design groups for the year." He said, "How's it going?" I said, "It's going great, except I don't have a lighting designer for the first show." And I said, "Well, how hard can that be? I'll do that." So that was literally how I got into theater. Blithe Spirit. So it wasn't exactly, a complicated show, but that was the intro. So I was out of college, and I worked in various and sundry places for about 3 years, some theater, some building scenery. Decided if I was going to get serious about lighting, I needed a little bit more training. So I got into the MFA program at UCLA, which was an okay program, but I met a guy there named Matt Pretty, who a lot of you know, ex-Disney people know. Matt was in charge of rigging, and about two months before graduating, I had the idea that maybe I should look for a job. So I was asking around and said, "Hey, what's going on?" And he says, "Remember Matt Pretty?" He says, "Yeah, big guy was down in rigging. What happened to him?" He went to work for a Disney design company. And I said, "Disney has a design company? That's pretty cool." So HR was a lot more casual then. This is 1980. And if you knew somebody there, and I called Matt up, and you get a little tag that goes on top of your resume, it floats to the top of the pile. And I got hired. And I started on the exact same day as Paula Dinkel. We were in our orientation. We have to say our name and what department we're going to be in. And I say, Pat Gallegos, show lighting. And Paula says, Paula Dinkel, show lighting. I look around, and there she was. So that's my history with Paula. Now, she lasted there a lot longer than I did. I was there for the Epcot days for about 3 years. And I thought that this is kind of cool. Maybe I can get my Mickey watch in 30 years, but after Epcot there was no work, so most of the lighting designers and a whole bunch of other people were looking for work, and I think only Joe Falzetta and John Shipley were the only ones that. Did Paula, did you survive that? You survived that.
Yeah, so John, Joe, and me. Yeah.
It was the three of you, and then so I started my business in the middle of one of the worst recessions ever. So things weren't so hot for a year or so, but I'm still kicking away after all these years. So that's kind of the short story or medium lane story of how I got started.
Okay, so there's I'm sure students, you hear the common thread here. We all started in the theater. We all know each other and have known each other for a really long time. So that's that networking part. So presenters, did you think you were going to spend your career in the theater when you were in college?
Well, I'll jump in. I always enjoyed theater, but at one point, before Disney, before I got the job at Disney, I kept thinking, well, I don't know if I really want, I'd like to, have some semblance of a normal life, and to be successful in the theatrical world, you're going to be flying all over the place, and you got a gig here and a gig there and a gig there, and I wouldn't mind seeing if I could work into the kind of architectural realm. So getting a job at Imagineering was pretty much perfect for transitioning into something that was both theatrical and also architectural. That being said, the thing about not traveling all over the place didn't work out now, because on any given year or day, I could be any place in the world. Not so much this year. I haven't been on a plane in probably 10 months, like a lot of people. So, so that thing about not needing to fly all over the place didn't quite work out. But I have zero regrets in terms of doing that.
Yeah, the last time Pat and I worked together, we were in Dubai.
Yeah.
So that's all.
4 years ago, that was fun. Which was after knowing Paula for all those years, that's the first time we actually worked together, as opposed to knowing each other and kind of waving and having lunches and dinners and drinks or whatever along the way.
Right. So I should mention here that Pat was the president of the Themed Entertainment Association, which is an international group for people working in the industry in all facets of it. How about Jen? How about you?
Yeah, I went to school for theater. I did not know what I wanted to do, and I knew I didn't want to do theater because of the same reasons Pat mentioned, the hours. And it's funny, even though I'm an artist, I've never thought of myself as an artist. So I felt like in some ways I didn't quite have the chops to make it in the regional theater world. But, everyone told me, and this was good advice, even though I didn't believe it, they just said, do what you like doing and just get on the escalator and start going. And so I went to grad school for theater, even though I kind of knew that's not what I wanted to do, but I liked it. And I feel like a path just grew from there. I never thought I'd end up in themed entertainment necessarily, but I knew I'd end up somewhere different from the theater world.
Okay, so what is your lighting life like today? Talk a little bit about what you do now, and then I'd like you to show your presentation, your PowerPoint. So who wants to start?
Absolutely.
Jen, you want to start?
I'm happy to go first. All right, if we're ready, I'm going to jump into it. All right, so the question Paula posed to us is, what does a theme park designer do, and what do we do every day? And I thought about this for weeks, and I figured it out. It's paperwork. We do paperwork. And you know what? This whole presentation, I literally started making a presentation just about the different paperwork, because it's interesting and it's what we do, but it's super boring. So we're not going to spend the whole presentation on that. I did want to give you a sneak peek of it, though, because I think it's important to think about it while you're doing theater, because you have theater paperwork, you have a light plot, you have an instrument schedule, you have your paperwork, but there's a lot of stuff missing. The theater paperwork assumes a lot of things, like it assumes wires that are already there. It assumes a person knows what a source 4 is with 36 degrees. All of that stuff's assumed. And then in the themed world, you're drawing buildings from scratch. So you have to tell people where all the wires go and what a source 4 really is and what you could substitute it with. So this next page is just a basic list of theme park paperwork that I'm not going to go over. And I pulled this from a typical project we do at Universal. And believe it or not, I deleted some things. So this is just what's left of the core paperwork. And then something important to note, and something that does relate to theater, is being thorough and accurate are really important. And that's an important part of the job. In addition to being a good designer, you have to be thorough and have a good attention to detail. Otherwise, you can make a mistake that costs a lot of money down the line. So, and that's something you can think about as you're doing theater, is think about it, you know, where's this light going to plug in? How's this cable going to be looped? Even if you're not doing this paperwork, there might be stuff that you can think about in the back of your head. So then I figured nobody wants to hear any more about paperwork. So I'm going to tell you about some cool stuff that we do. So Radiance does a lot of permanent installations. We recently did the Secret Life of Pets ride. We did a Jurassic Park renovation, the DreamWorks Theater, and we were working on a land over in Beijing for the new park over there before COVID started. And we've split the company up into permanent installations like the rides, and then live events, which is really what I've started to focus on the last couple of years. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about Halloween Horror Nights, which is one of the attractions I manage every year. I'm not sure if any of you have been to Horror Nights, but it's a pretty big production. It's 9 mazes, and then we overlay the entire theme park in the backlot. We work with 13 lighting designers underneath myself at Radiance, and then 2 project managers. So Halloween process, here's a photo of Hunter, one of our designers and programmers, hanging out in the Stranger Thing maze. We typically start this process as early as January or February, and we go through a design process that's at least very similar to what I did in theater in school. And we have creative meetings where we go through the treatments, which is what they call the script for a walkthrough attraction, with the creative team, and we talk about what each scene wants to look like, and we draw the light plots. From there, we typically around June or July go into bid and pre-production, where we start shop prep and gear lists and instrument schedules, etc. And then, of course, we start installing it in August to open in September. And that is, so Halloween is very fast in the theme park world, and I'm sure some of the other presenters will talk about that. This is a project that starts and ends within the period of a year, whereas most of our rides are in production for at least, we've done them as fast as 1 year, but you're typically looking at least 3 to 5 years to get a ride open. And just to show you something very theatrical, this is a typical light plot for a single room in a maze. In theater, at least, I've always thought about things as systems, so front light and back light and side light, and I've carried that into all of the theme park attractions we do. So even a dark ride will have systems of light, whether it's audience lights or prop accents or vehicle washes. So those are all systems to me. And when I think about a design, I work system by system. And I also use that to, aside from design, we use that to budget, because budgeting is a huge part of design for theme parks and staying in budget. So I tend to budget by systems, so we can cut systems or value engineer systems. Halloween has pretty simple layouts. We have a wall scrape, that's our general lighting. We have an accent for the characters. We have a backlight for the characters, and we have window backlights. So it's really simple. It seems complicated because in the end, each maze might have 300 lights and the whole park might have 10,000 lights, but it really comes down to 4 or 5 simple systems that we've plotted over and over again. I was gonna dive into the schedule, but it's really boring, so we're gonna skip that. I am circling back on paperwork though, because the interesting thing about Horror Nights is while I'm one of the 2 lead designers, there's so much paperwork involved that I barely have any time to touch the design. So I work with Karen Lawrence, and she does all of our light plots and attends all of our meetings. And then I will deal with things like where we're going to store the equipment, where people park, tracking schedules, lift schedules, getting onto all of the roofs and getting, there's a lot of safety compliance, at least in theme park world. So we have to identify any roofs we're going to walk on, scope them out with someone from Universal's Environmental Health and Safety Department, and make sure we have safe access. And then for each roof we're going to get on, we'll write a safety proposal that everyone has to sign that explains how we'll get on the roof safely and how we'll get off the roof safely. So knock on wood, we have not had any accidents since we started in 2006. I think due to some of that safety protocol. All right. And then the next thing I wanted to show you guys, because something I like is, at least in the theme park world, is challenging situations and doing new and creative things. So I get bored very quickly. I always like to create things from scratch. So I wanted to show you a little bit of work we did for the Nighttime Lights project and some custom fixtures we developed. This is a screenshot of the castle. And in the early creative meetings, the team wanted to be able to project on the castle. And what you're seeing here is all video mapping. There's no lights on the castle, all video projection. But they wanted the projection to cover all of the trees. And we tried that, believe it or not. We mocked it up. We tried to cover the trees with projection. It did not work very well. So one of the solutions they came up with was this idea to just put some sparkle in the trees, which sounded simple, just put out some sparkle. So we decided to take this on, and one of the challenges here was that they did not want to see any of these lights during the day. They don't want anyone to go in the land and see a bunch of Christmas lights in the trees. So what we came up with was this plan to put pine cones in all the trees and paint them out and hide them so you can't see them. And this is a quick photo run through of the process we took to get that bought off by Warner Brothers and the Potter team from scratch. So step one was a proof of concept. And while this is unique to pine cones, this is a process that you'll go through for theme park rides if you're doing a unique situation and have to mock something up and create something new that hasn't been done before. But this happens to be pine cones. So this was a proof of concept just to prove that we could put a fake pine cone in the tree, light it up, and you wouldn't see it. So there's a photo on the right, pine cones in the tree. And of course, we took a lot of videos of this daytime and nighttime and sent them to Warner Brothers and the Potter team to get buy-off on this proof of concept to move forward. Next step, once we did that, was we put it into concept sketches because we needed thousands of these and we couldn't make them all by hand, like the first step. So we set up a concept sketch showing what we wanted the final pine cone to look like. From there, we moved into 3D modeling and SolidWorks. So we worked with someone from a company, I think now he's with EcoSense, but he's a fixture designer. And he helped us model something in SolidWorks that could be created as an injection mold. So we could inject it and create thousands of pine cones. So we got to that phase. The next step before so a mold, an injection mold, is thousands of dollars. So you don't want to jump right to that phase. Our next step was 3D printing. So we 3D printed the pine cones to look at scale, figure out the scale we like, and make sure the lights fit inside and it all lights up nicely before we spend thousands of dollars on the molds. And then, oh yeah, this is, we did a lot of durability tests, including putting some cats to play with them. That worked out well. And finally, injection molding. So that was an exciting day when we got the first batch of injection molded pine cones back. And from there, production and painting, we took them all to Chicago, painted thousands of them. We assembled them, put covers on them, and packed them and shipped them off. So this was quite a challenge. We did this in 2 months, which is very fast for a custom fixture. And in the end, we had these magical trees.
Wow. Very nice.
That's our presentation. Thanks.
Wow. Thank you very much, Jen.
Yeah, fantastic, Jen. Those are beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Impressive. Okay. So, Pat, do you want to go next?
Sure.
You got like 10 minutes.
Listen, what I'm showing you all is just something that we send out. It's actually a little bit dated, a few years ago, but it still gives the basic general approach that we would send out to say if somebody says, "Hey, tell us the kind of stuff that you've done." So it tells our approach and some of the things that we've done. I guess that the basis at the bottom of this is the way we say is we tell a project story in light, and it's a story developed with the project team. So that's the tie back to the theatrical world and what I learned in theater and working as a theatrical group. It doesn't always work out in the world of architecture because you're dealing with a lot of people that don't have a clue as to how theatrical teams work. You're dealing with architects, engineers, landscape people, estimators. Hopefully you have a core group that understands the process and that the process is something that's in process throughout, because a lot of the other people say, what's the answer? What's the answer? What's the answer? Nowadays, a lot of things are in Revit, and I have a big issue with Revit in that it forces you, if they force you to do it too early, it forces you to make decisions that you're not in a position to make. Example, if you say, I want to put a sconce on this wall here, normally you would say you put, in the 2D world, you put a little symbol of some type which has a tail on it, and you stick it on the wall and you give it a fixture type. Maybe you can assign a dimmer to it or some other control, and you're done. In Revit, they kind of said, okay, how big is it? What does it look like? Because the architects want to make sure it's attached to the right thing, and often the right thing doesn't even exist in the model to do it. Anyway, so that's the kind of world that you're working in. And we go through, we talked a little bit about my history. After Disney, I realized early on that I love working on theme parks, but if I want to be successful as a business, theme parks are very cyclical. Unless you're like Brian or Paula or Joe Falzetta, who are lucky enough to be at a place like Imagineering for a long time. All the rest is pretty much project work, and you have to keep if you have a business, whether it's a single person or whether it's multiple people like Jan has or other people have, like Lisa has or ourselves, you got to keep people working. So we've worked in under market sectors: museums, aquariums, zoos, theme parks, hotels, conference centers, restaurants, high-end residential, churches, synagogues, mosques. So it was interesting what Jen started off with, the paperwork, and I laugh at that because there's a lot of that, and it's a critical part of what we need to do. Partly because you need to take all of your creative thoughts and be able to put them in one way or another down on multiple pieces of paper, whether they're real or virtual. And all those schedules are really critical. I mean, it's the same in theater. It's just in a large theme park project, there's just a lot more of it. It's like every theme park project, every building, it's like you're building a theater from scratch. You're not just designing a show to go into a theater, which is complicated enough as it is. I've had various iterations of Gallegos lighting design. At one point, I had 3 different offices: Orlando, Los Angeles, and San Francisco, where I live, with fully staffed offices. Now I have small resources in the US, and I have a lighting design and production team, which is primarily out of Dubai. And you might wonder why so far away. Well, back when Paul and I were there, and a little bit afterward, I came into contact with a really great group called Umayya Lighting Design in Dubai that is fully staffed with smart people and talented people. This is kind of the core group of that. So we literally have people from all over the world, and we just finished a project for Universal, one of their new lands at the new Epic Park, which unfortunately went on hold in August, but that's the way of the world at the moment. But we have some great people that we're working with, and we did all of that, all the production for that with all of these folks here, and it's a great team. One of the advantages of that is that with the 12-hour time difference, I can do red lines and they can do the work, and we get the work out, and people are amazed as to how fast we get it done. What did you guys do? Work all night? Well, actually, yeah. So some of the other stuff, and these are things that are, on one hand, they're not technically either theatrical or theme parks, but the people in gaming and resorts, they have a lot of money. and a lot of them were very interested in things that bring people in. This is a project I worked on a number of years ago in Riverside, Missouri, which is just across the river from Kansas City. And with Argosy Casino, the designer, a guy named Lindsay Hendricks, was at Imagineering many moons ago. I didn't know him, but I had a reference. And we have a lot of fun both with the inside and the outside. The upper left picture is an example. All those little dots there are a moment in time where we wanted to make the building sparkle, similar to what Disney does with the castle. So one of my best moments in my career was going into a meeting and telling the contractor that we're going to put about 800 holes in his building. After he came down off the ceiling, we explained, okay, we're going to figure this out. And the owner was very much behind this, so we ended up with a very kind of a great twinkly thing using, the Burkett strobes, which are kind of the go-to for small programmable strobes. But the interior was all interior, and we had some great places from the upper right, which is a restaurant, to the main gaming floor, the middle picture, and the sky. This is a huge space. The main gaming floor, the sky was about as big as a football field, literally. So there's a lot of challenges to make it look naturalistic while dealing with the constraints of things like sprinklers in the ceiling. We had fiber optics in the ceiling to coordinate, and most of the rest of it was simple theatrical techniques multiplied by about 5,000. We certainly have a lot of experience in theme parks and resorts, and it's still one of my favorites. This project is the project that Paul and I worked on together 4 years ago. Let me see if I can zoom in here a little bit. So this is a project called Motiongate. It's in Dubai at Dubai Parks and Resorts. Hang on a second. And we pretty much did the whole theme park, well, except for one section, which wasn't ours. But the upper left, starting upper left, landscape lighting, fountain lighting, facade lighting, all the trees. Another land is the Columbia Pictures land. There was 26 different attractions. We did all of those attractions. Some were very simple, some were a lot more complex. A little Smurf attraction. If you can see my cursor there. The next one was I'm blanking. Ghostbusters attraction. Hotel Transylvania. There was a whole area that half the park was called DreamWorks Animation Zone, all inside with Shrek, Kung Fu Panda, Madagascar, this row down here, and How to Train Your Dragon. So and the whole park turned out quite well. Unfortunately, I always say it's one of the best looking parks that we've ever done that nobody goes to. It was partly because of the area, partly because of marketing needs work. And kind of a whole different tack is working in hospitality, which includes hotels. This is formerly the Peabody Hotel. We did the whole new tower and that they did a number of years ago. Lower left is high-end residential outside of Jackson, Wyoming. This for the guy who was the founder of Ameritrade. First time I worked with a Forbes 400 self-made multi-billionaire. Nice guy, actually.
Pat, about 1 minute.
Okay, so there's theater as an architectural theaters, the Capitan Theater, a few other things, Sony Lincoln Centers in New York. This more straightforward theme park work. A lot of work in museums. But all the same techniques that we're talking about, the theatrical techniques, really go into play with all of these, and it's really all about breaking a big project down into a lot of smaller pieces and then putting them back together at the end. Okay.
Great. Thank you, Pat. That was great. Brian.
I threw together a bunch of slides that cover the gamut of all the stuff I've done within the many-headed hydra that is Disney. I've worked for just about every department, the studio special events for movie premieres, Disneyland Entertainment, Disney World Entertainment, Paris Disneyland, Shanghai, Tokyo, Disney Latin America. So, and all of them interrelate. And many of these I did while I was an Imagineer, many before I was an Imagineer, and some since I've been an Imagineer. And in no particular order, I'm going to share. Here we go. Okay. Big Disney show in a racetrack in Mexico City. Another big show in more slides, a massive screen. I did the projection and the lighting for this. And they built Disney parade floats on top of trucks out of chicken wire. And it ran for 3 weeks. It was pretty cool. El Capitan Theater for the opening of the first Pirates movie. We did this big scrim. Before a lot of the movies, we do a little stage presentation of some sort. Sometimes it's a full-on Disney production. Sometimes it's just a little teaser. So we put this scrim of the map and dissolved into the laughing skull at the El Capitan. This is Candlelight at Disneyland. I've done this every year for 20 years. After I left Imagineering, I got a call from one of my pals there, Joe Rohde, and they wanted to light the safari ride in Animal Kingdom at night. This is a test, 2:00 in the morning in Disney's Animal Kingdom. I put up a huge lift and a LED screen, and the light that is falling here is 1,500 feet away. And if you look back, it looks like this. And really lovely shot we did with the natural moon and our side light. And there's another picture of an elephant drinking out of this pond that didn't come out as well. But the idea was to extend the nighttime activity. And what my idea was to freeze sunset. So as the sun went down, we brought up the lights and did this beautiful orange, beautiful David Lean style sunset across all of the safari. And it worked pretty good. And then they got, COVID killed them. And I think they changed it all to LED fixtures and it looks terrible. Pirates of the Caribbean did all the Pirates of the Caribbean premieres at Disneyland. We built a screen on Tom Sawyer's Island, relit and redecorated the pirate ship, and did a big stage performance with IMAG. Hans Zimmer brought his band, and they did a little rock show before and after. Did the Indiana Jones stunt show in Walt Disney World and the studios in Walt Disney World. These all happen kind of all mixed together. You're not doing any one thing. What's cool about my career now and your career then is that you can have it all. And while I'm doing this, I'm doing stage shows and plays in LA. You want it all. This is a live premiere for Hunchback of Notre Dame in the Superdome in New Orleans. At the time, the world's record most moving lights on a show. We had every moving light in Southern California. We had them all working together. We had Morpheus, we had Verilight, we had LSD. You can see the rig overhead. An 80-foot wide stage, 120 people. It's like 4 Broadway stages, 4 equity waiver stages, and an orchestra pit with 120 people in it, live on the Disney Channel. This is a mock-up of an attraction. We designed a Dick Tracy shooting gallery attraction where you ride through your car and you have machine guns bolted onto your car and you're trying to catch the bootleggers. And this is a model. Disney used to do these really cool models. They're built at shoulder high, so you walk through them, and they're like 1/2 inch or 1 inch scale. So this was the lighting for the model. Very high angle, chiaroscuro. It was really cool.
That was for Disney's America?
That was going to be for Tokyo, because the Japanese love machine guns. But, you know, Michael Eisner decided we couldn't build a ride with machine guns, you know, so big Disney spectacular Mickey Mouse sing and dancing show in Costa Rica. All the standby, all the same, you know, they do the same Disney music over and over again. And it's all the hits from all the shows. And this sung in Spanish. Did the premiere for the Tower of Terror ride.
Amid the glitz and the glitter of a bustling young movie town at the height of its golden age, the Hollywood Tower Hotel was a star in its own right, a beacon for the show business elite. Now, something is about to happen that will change all that.
Ladies and gentlemen, your rooms are ready.
That was cool. 1,000,000-watt strobes we got from the movie industry, 2 1,000,000-watt strobes. And I also got to design the pyro for that. A big stage show, the Broadway theater show in Tokyo Disneyland, Tokyo Disney Sea, actually. Very much a compendium of all the hit musical numbers from Broadway over the last 20 or 30 years. This was a reimagining of 42nd Street. Did some cool stuff for production from Steam Heat. Got to dig back into my theater textbooks and scripts for a show in Tokyo. Did a really cool nighttime event. Tokyo Disneyland wanted to extend the guests staying at night. So we did a show called Cinderellabration. Their name, why the Japanese would ever name something with so many R's and L's in it. Cinderellabration. We built this huge arch out in the hub in front of the castle. We relit the castle. And then these are all programmed LEDs built into jewels throughout the castle forecourt. There was a stage show that came with it. The idea is this is a gift from Prince Charming to Cinderella, and this was her coronation, the big event, and it ran once a night at dark, and it ran all winter months for 4 years. Thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of LEDs on arches that were put up and taken down just for the winter months. And these are all programmed to music. There's a back soundtrack going. Jason Badger programmed this on a Hog 2 with a hog chopper, and it took him an hour and a half to load the show and save it every night when we were programming. Had a bunch of lucite statues, the 7 scenes from Cinderella all through the forecourt, all uplit below, and they tell the story. I've done the Tokyo Disneyland Electrical Parade since they rebuilt it. I've been the designer for the last 17 years, and the original design was 13 new parade floats, 32 new parade floats, and then every couple of years we take a few out and put in new IP. It started as Christmas tree lights, old-fashioned Christmas tree lights, and for the last 10 years, every time we upgrade, we migrate to LED. So you can see on the left here, the Blue Fairy is all LED float, and the Peach Dragon and the train are old-fashioned Christmas lights. More Christmas lights. Love all animated. Every single unit has a show controller on it and is playing to time code. we did a really cool all LED genie float.
魔法で楽しんでってね。そんな場にバイト中にも盗賊がいた。だけどマスター、あんたはもっとラッキー。誰も叶いはしない。すごいパワー、あんたのコーナー。そんな街は爆弾。ほら見てやったか。なんかちょっとこするだけだよ。よっしゃ。ご主人様、ご用は何。はいが10万が変わっちゃう。お気に召すまま。止めるワニ、助けて冷たいよ、にも。あれこれどうなっちゃってもう。おいおい、誰か止めてくれ。
Brian, about 1 minute.
Did a new float for Peter Pan, this latest iteration of the Tokyo Electrical Parade. And Tinkerbell flies on and takes over the whole float. The float has Peter Pan, Captain Hook, and Wendy on board. The sails are image mesh LED screens from Komoden, and we did the projection as well. So let me get this last one here. We wanted to have a sword fight between Captain Hook and Peter Pan, but we weren't allowed to do that for safety reasons on board the float. So we shot them on green screen and had their, isn't that playing? Had their shadows fighting on the sails.
Cool.
All right, that's enough of that. What's cool about themed entertainment, themed environments, is you can do a ride one day, you can do a landscape lighting, you can do an attraction, a show, a movie premiere. We talked earlier about having a theatrical career. It's all informed by your education in telling stories, how to tell stories with your technology in your way. And it applies across the board to all these kinds of projects that I've been doing. I think of myself as a theater designer on a different stage.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, fantastic, Brian.
That was great.
There were some questions in the chat.
Yes.
Did anyone have any questions they wanted to ask out loud at this point? Joy has a question. Go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question. Do you need to create a 3D rendering or pre-visualization for each project? And what software do you use to create it?
I'll answer that. In one of my projects I'm working on right now, we are using 3D. We're using a company called Early Bird in LA, and we're getting models. Basically, it winds up as a Cinema 4D object, but many pieces of software go into it. In 6 months, I'd love to show you our renderings on our models. I can't do it right now because it's still in process. But basically, we take a 3D architectural model of the building, and we light it up with actual sources. It's the same software that Early Bird uses for programming rock shows and TV shows. So we can plug the building into a theatrical controller and program it. And so we do use that. In other projects, I have used 3D models to some extent, but there's a time and a money situation with 3D models. I don't know why I get projects that we don't have time for that. We got to get drawings out in 6 weeks. So we're not modeling anything. Trust me, I'm going to design a beautiful ride for you, a beautiful attraction, whatever. Where it's needed, we have used it, but we don't use it every time.
Okay, and Jake has a question.
I think Emma actually had a question before me.
Hi, everyone. My question is, how often do you find yourself also being the projection designer, or how you do pyrotechnics, for like that, the Hollywood Tower of Terror, how often do you find that you're also meshing into other like just visual design aspects?
Well, on the Tower of Terror, the production, the producer was a friend of mine. In fact, he was the producer on this electrical parade that I built in Tokyo. And so he just came to me and he said, I want to rip the face of the building off, because that's the story of Tower of Terror, is that a lightning came and sheared off the tower, and that's why the elevators. How would you do it? And so I said, well, I have pyro and I have projection. I do the sliding thing, and we have some smoke and all that stuff. Is great. Do it. So that's the only time I've gotten to design pyro. I have done projection many times. I prefer to do projection because you don't have to fight with a lighting designer about how much level there is. But I've worked in, if it's a really huge, immense projection show, then either I'll do projection or lighting, but not both. But if it's something that interfaces together, I'm happy to do projection. I don't do it. I hire people. I do it like this, and I get the budget and I pitch the ideas, and then we get a really great team of projectionists and we do projection.
I think in general, in most projects, it probably tends to be lighting designer and projection designer. Brian happens to have the skill set to do both. I haven't engaged in really live theater for decades. I think we're pretty good at the overall theme park and attraction side of it, the architecture, but that tends to be. I don't know if you agree, Brian. It tends to be in most cases kind of separate careers that still involve the meshing of two different designers.
Yeah, on a large project, on these big projects that I do, these big installs, there's usually a budget and there's a sensitivity of projection being its own discipline. Usually I'm on the job, the production designer is on the job, then the lighting designer is on the job before the projection designer is. And so a lot of times I will bring projection up. Should we do this? I think this would be better solved with projection rather than with, lighting and animation and Gallegos. So I think one should be well versed and educated as to projection, whether you do it or not, so you can have a really good conversation with a projection designer if you're not the one, understand their issues and understand how you can make it look like you were all one designer. So, projection anymore right now, you guys, projection is lighting. We're oftentimes using it to light the stage, to light the environment. So be well educated, even if you aren't a projection designer.
So I've got a question. Thank you for sharing with us. My main question is, so for students like me who are coming out of college, who are about to graduate, and who are looking to go into this industry, given the current circumstance, do you have any advice for us moving forward on how we can look at careers in an industry, obviously, that's kind of hurt by the current pandemic?
Jen's hiring.
Yeah, I'm the one here working. Man, in terms of getting into careers right now, I think it's a hard time to get a job. I don't want to say impossible, but it might be near impossible. One advantage of this time, which is rare, is I think a lot of us, at least I am, slower than I've ever been, and so I've had a lot more time to talk to students and do things like this. So I think if you have people you want to work with and you're interested in their industry, I think now's the time to make those connections because they'll probably have time to make them back with you. The other thing I add is, I think we're going to talk more about this later, in terms of hiring people, I tend to look more at two things. One is, I think their personality to handle client-facing situations, writing professional emails, interfacing professionally, dressing professionally. I look at paperwork in terms of the quality. I don't expect to see a theme park cable schedule, but I want to look at a theater instrument schedule and see that I can clearly see all the columns and I can see what's there, and you can create presentable paperwork. And then the third thing I forgot. Oh, yeah. No, it's just an interest in doing new things. Because when we interview people, I never expect them to have the theme park experience. I don't expect them to know how to do things the way Radiance does. I just want to see that they know what good work looks like, how to talk to people, and they're eager to jump in. So, and that's really what it takes.
Yeah, and I would say if you're thinking about going into theme parks, in theme parks you run across things you never run across in theaters. And the equipment in particular, building standards and building codes that you wouldn't otherwise. So if you get a chance to take like a beginning lighting class from the Illuminating Engineering Society of North America, I highly recommend doing that. They have a beginning class and a second class after that, and go to meetings, join. Look at the Themed Entertainment Association, the TEA. Join. I think they have a student, right, Pat? Do they have a student classification?
It's called Next Gen.
Next Gen. The Next Gen in theme parks.
Yeah, they're incredibly active, and they have some really great people. And I'm every day impressed with the quality of the people that are interested in the industry, because I started out when I was like the age of, like, let's say half the people on this, more than half the people, and I still think I'm that age, but I look in the mirror and I'm not. And I'm really excited that there are a lot of people that are excited about carrying on and doing what Paula and myself and Jen and Brian have been doing for essentially our whole careers, and that's really great to see. But definitely check that out if you're interested in work in theme park. It's a great networking ability. There's a lot of great programs, and it's very easy to get involved. And also just staying in touch with people like us. I think you have all of our emails and probably phone numbers, and don't be afraid to pick up the phone. And when we started, there wasn't really anybody to talk to. We were kind of creating it as we went along in many ways. Now there's a lot of people to talk to, and even if the job market sucks right now, which it does both for individuals and also for businesses, there's a lot of things that we thought were solid projects that have disappeared, but it'll come back. It does. It may be different. I don't know. There are a lot of people that make a lot more money than I'll ever make at Disney and Universal and other places that are trying to figure this out, and they haven't figured it out yet. So,
yeah. When Pat and I both started at Imagineering, there was really not such a thing as a theme park lighting designer. We were learning from the studio electricians who actually lit Disneyland in the first place, and we were learning from the old masters and then since then we've been like passing it on when we have the opportunity to the next gen. So if you want to be a theme park lighting designer, you need to go where the theme parks are. Go visit theme parks. Take some business classes, by the way. Take a couple business classes. Be good for you, especially if you want to freelance. Okay, do we have any more questions?
Yeah, so Paula, you answered my question about jumping into the industry already. That was fantastic. Thank you. I guess I'm curious about lighting like blacklit lit environments. I know Disney is really famous for their dark rides and using blacklight on their figures and everything. I've never lit something that's almost entirely lit by blacklight, and I was curious if you guys have experience with that or
yes,
considerations that you need to have when you're going through that.
The nice thing about blacklight right now is that, as opposed to when I think we all started, you had your choice of things like whatever there happened to be out in the market with fluorescent blacklights, and there were some mercury vapor blacklights, all of which were really not very good because there's a lot of visible light involved. Now there's some really nice blacklighting options now, which are also dimmable, and they're since they're LED, they can control the wavelength much tighter. So it's really pretty close to a real blacklight. As far as techniques, I think it's just a matter of, if you've never done it before, get a hold of some things and play around with it. But you'll find that your kind of approach is, it's the same as you do with visible light. You're learning a new tool, and you learn what it does good and what it doesn't do.
And you need to learn about blacklight painting too,
Yes.
because we do not put in like little highlights on the edges of steps or lights in the windows. Those are done by the painters. We just aim the blacklight at it. And sometimes it's hard to convince the painter that they actually need, the art director, that it's the painter who needs to paint in the highlights, not the lighting designer. So, but you can mix incandescent light and blacklight carefully.
My suggestion is always, test.
Yep.
Test the paint, test the fixtures, test the materials, the extrusions, whatever. Do not go out. It's like a lawyer. Know the answer to the question before you ask it. Is test everything.
Yeah.
The other big secret with blacklight is that whoever's painting it should paint it under the exact conditions, meaning you don't have to build a space, but they should have the lights at the same distance, the same locations physically away from whatever the blacklight painting is, to ensure that you're going to get the best results. Otherwise, you don't know, because like Paula said, it really the detail has to be painted in, and we throw light at it.
Yeah, one of my first big things, I worked Disneyland for 10 years, my first 10 years in Imagineering. So I got to know the Haunted Mansion really, really well. And that was always an issue, like, well, the lights aren't bright enough. We need more lights. It's like, no, the lights are fine. You actually need to refresh the paint on the tombstones or on the whatever it was, and go in there and test things and show art directors that really it was something not.
Well, that's the thing I learned, is the decay in the paint is dramatic. So it does not last. It has to be refreshed and refreshed and refreshed. They think it's lighting, and it's not. They're giving up their photons and electrons throughout their whole life, and they're going to get tired.
Just a quick follow-up question then. You were talking about needing to tell the painters about light and shadow. Do you then tell them how you want light and shadow to work in the painting, or they just put it in?
Nope. Actually, those are done by the artists who will do drawings of the scenes, and they show where the highlights are and where moonlight falls on the steps or where the window is lit. It's already designed that way by the artists. Not the painters, but by the artists who do the storyboards and the show set designers.
Blacklight lighting is not an art. You're delivering lumens to a surface.
Right.
You as much as you can. There's no sculpting. That's all done in the paint and in the material.
Yeah.
But like Paula said, what you mix in a little incandescent, a little feature, little accent lights that are not. That's where you can get a little. If you're delicate about it, then you get a little more dimension.
Yeah, you have to be really careful. You can do it, like on the floor, maybe a little here and there. But yeah, you have to be very careful. And also careful when you introduce things like not even the practical lights, the ones that are like lanterns. Those are also painted. So, but once you introduce something like fiber optics, like in Peter Pan for the little lights of the little stars and things, is like you got to be careful they're not too bright so they don't wash out the black light.
The other big thing with blacklight is you have to be really careful about using it outdoors. And in fact, it's very difficult to do it outdoors because you're not doing it for the daytime, but the biggest UV source in the world is that big thing in the sky, the sun, and it's talked about UV degradation. Now, that said, I know that Joe Falzetta did some great blacklighting stuff at Avatar, a lot of it outdoors, and it'd be interesting. I have no idea. Last time I was there about a year ago, it looked pretty good, but I don't know if they have to touch up a lot or not.
I know I've always wondered that. We use blacklight for horror nights outdoors, but we will literally cover the facades during the day.
Yeah.
Because even the 2 months they're out there, they won't survive.
Yeah, basically the same stuff that gives you sunburn sucks out. You know, it really kills this stuff. But
I have a blacklight lit electrical parade unit in southern China, and we shroud it every night, so every day. So it has a shroud over it, and we pull it off, and it seems to hold up pretty well. It's been like 3 years now.
They've had to repaint it, right?
Yeah, they keep refreshing it.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Yes, I do. Thank you. So for me, like I've worked in theme park lighting before. I worked as an assistant designer, but many times it was always like walking into projects that already exist. When you're working in theme park lighting, that they're buying the actual attractions themselves, because like mine is maybe like Six Flags and Disney, in which they construct their own attractions. When you're working in theme parks that might buy from, are you able to add lighting or add, a certain level of design when it comes to attractions that are bought from a company?
Are you talking about like a dark attraction or something inside of a box? Or are you talking about things that are outside?
Outside, I guess like a good example would be like for me, like I worked at Nickelodeon Universe over in Mall of America, and like they buy their attractions from a company. So and we did only just like small little special effects, but are we actually able to, or have you ever been able to actually, go into the attraction and like maybe like add lights and stuff like that, or like add your own spin on it?
But when you say attraction, are you talking about attraction in a box, for lack of a better?
I see what you're saying. Sorry, like outdoor. Yeah, it would be outdoor, I guess, in that situation, or indoor. Both.
Well,
I'm willing to hear both.
You're talking about buying a ride system and applying that. Like Nickelodeon buys a ride system and they put their SpongeBob overlay on it.
Mm-hmm.
That is the time to introduce your particular lighting to it. The ride system is a store-bought, off-the-shelf thing. Right?
Yeah.
So these B and C level theme parks do that. They buy these off-the-shelf ride systems. They need to overlay their IP onto it. Mm-hmm. That is the time to do the individual lighting on that. And yes, you can get it. I was on a project where they bought a Ferris wheel. And I said, great, I'm going to get in there. I'm going to relight the Ferris wheel. And I did this whole layout, how we're going to have control and everything. And they didn't communicate that to the Ferris wheel vendor. So it came with its all horrible, carny, gap tooth carnival lighting light bulbs on it. And it was too late to change it. Even though I'd given them the information, you really need, if you're in that situation, you need to get in their faces. We do not want it off the shelf lighting. We want our lighting on it.
That's a critical thing. What Brian just said is that you really need to get involved soon, and like he said, you need to push your issue if you're the designer, and because just take a big iron ride. You can attach stuff to there, but they have to know about it ahead of time and approve it ahead of time. Otherwise, don't touch this ride with anything, and that applies to everybody in the world, because they have the liability if something happens. It doesn't matter how innocuous it might seem, but if you work with your client or the owner and say we want to do this, then they say okay, and we'll give you places to attach it, but it has to be approved way ahead of time, because they place orders for ride system, off-the-shelf ride system. That's the first thing they do, because there aren't that many places in the world that make these off-the-shelf systems, and they have a backlog of 2 or 3 years easy. So you want to get in the queue as soon as possible.
And you can't just attach to it afterwards, because you might damage the structural integrity of a ride system, which you don't want to do with a roller coaster in particular.
Mm-hmm. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's just a light. They don't care.
Yeah. Slew had a question about the difference between an attraction installation versus a production or event.
I was trying to get a clarification. Slew's she's chat only right now. Her initial question was, can you speak to the differences of installing lighting systems? So I'd asked her a clarifying question to see if I could get some more information.
Right.
She has not responded to that. yet. Okay. But Jake, you had a question about the sun, and I don't think my answer suited you. So,
yeah, I had a question about the sun. So love it, hate it. How do you use it to your advantage, like at sunset, for example, especially when you're doing like architectural treatments? Because I know anytime I've done architectural projects, the hardest part is coming into twilight and kind of the reveal of the lighting, but making sure that your design intent is still upheld even when the sun doesn't want it to be.
Well, the first thing is in the daytime, the sun always wins. So there's no way you can fight the sun. I mean, you could play with the sun, and I worked with a light artist named Peter Erskine a number of years ago. He's still around, but he would do things like to use heliostats to capture the sun, then split it into the spectral colors, and then play with them in a space. But that's an expensive proposition, and that's about the only thing that I've seen that really uses the sun, and it works in the daytime because you're using the sun. Otherwise, you just can't compete artificially. Then I agree. There's that magic handoff, the magic hour of transitioning from sun to where we all pick it up.
I designed a castle stage show for Shanghai Disneyland, and I had to design to do 5 shows a day, 2 in broad daylight, 2 at dusk, and 1 at night. So I had to cue the show 3 times. And those shift as the year shifts. They have more shows in the daytime and less at night. But I basically had to design 3. And really bright LED footlights read in the daytime. 7K searchlights turned on in open white read in the daytime. So I created a lighting system that had the horsepower to make the state, because the sun is also one angle. You got this soft light that's over here, one part of the year, and it moves over here. It's right in your face. It moves wherever it is. You can design 7Ks coming in the other way to fill and punch up. It's just like, how videographers use a shiny board during the days. You can punch it up. You can punch up the shadows. So, knowing what you're working with, you can use it to your advantage. That key light is going to be on. So how do I fill? And you can get color. You can get color. You can get edge color on the back with enough horsepower. I wouldn't recommend it in an architectural application, but in a theatrical application, I can make it a partner.
So Slew's question was permanent installation versus seasonal, meaning imagining a seasonal attraction would be similar. Is a seasonal attraction similar to like doing a rep production? What kind of things do you have to consider for attractions versus like a theater repertory production in regards to an installation?
Jen does that every year.
Yeah.
Just put a whole system up, and we all do that. Theme parks have seasons, and there's a Christmas thing, and there's the Halloween thing, and then there's a summer thing, and in Tokyo we do an Easter thing, for God's sake. So there are these seasonal shows. That Cinderellabration was one I mentioned, is that the entire thing is gone for 9 months a year and dragged in for 3 months a year. So being sensitive to how it's like a rep attraction. How do you load it in and out? Has a lot of the same issues. Having a great production electrician and a great engineer is the key to doing that well. And also, where do they store it? How does it get stored while it's off stage? It's very from a theatrical training standpoint, it has a lot of the same issues when you're putting a show in rep and you want to save the show and run it in rep a couple of years later. Paperwork, make sure that you can reconfigure the design and make sure that the gear will work after it's been stored, and that it's easy to install and disinstall, and that connectors have to be designed so they can be plugged in and out, in and out, in and out. You have to connectorize things rather than hardwire things. And what is the code? It's 90 days for a temporary install, even though we have attractions that have been.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there are code requirements if you go past that. So, it's kind of like a theater rep situation.
Yeah, this is a very broad statement, but I mean everything that Brian said is very correct as for the live entertainment part, but there's the live entertainment part of theme parks is really much more akin to the theatrical world. The other side of it, the permanent architecture and permanent attractions, takes all of its cues as far as process from the architectural world. And then the biggest issue is you're interfacing with a lot of people that frankly, they don't really care what you're doing. I mean, you obviously care what you're doing, but they're just installing lights or running conduit, and they're not concerned about the niceties. One kind of telling thing on the project that Paul and I worked on 4 years ago, we got to a point where, it's behind schedule. It should have opened 4 months ago. They're out of money. And the senior project managers are telling me, well, we're like 90%. That's pretty good. That's good enough, isn't it? And I'm like, no, that 10% is where we do our magic. You cut out the 10% and you're cutting out one of the main reasons why we're even on the job. So that's a tough thing to deal with. And theme parks on the permanent side of things, the architectural, the non-entertainment theatrical side of it, they're, in my opinion, they're the most complicated construction projects in the world, because you have all the disciplines you have in theater, you have all the disciplines you have in general architectural and engineering, plus ones that pop out that you never heard of, depending on the type of project. And it's a huge juggling act. And the other thing you need is patience, because you can start a project, I think like Jen mentioned earlier, for the more live events, theatrical, it's still, maybe 6 months or a year, more like a theater project. But for a big project, you start and you open it 3 years from now, if you're lucky.
Yeah. Yeah. When we were doing Disney Studios Paris, we kind of worked out a deal where the construction companies building the park put in all the electrical and ran all the controls, installed all the technical parts of the park-wide lighting system, which was an ETC system, and dimmer cabinets. And then we hired 2 companies, one out of Edinburgh and one out of the Netherlands, and programmers out of Utrecht, to come in and install all the theatrical lighting equipment and also focus it. And usually in theme park projects, you end up with electricians trying to focus lights for you, and they're not stage electricians. So we wanted to avoid that, since it was Disney Studios, so there was a lot of theatrical lighting in it, and it worked out really, really well that way.
Good plug for ETC, by the way, Paula.
Well, they are the host here.
All joking aside, ETC has, as far as I'm concerned, the only park-wide lighting control system that should be used. Anything else is a kludge job. Yep, totally agree. Okay, and they didn't pay me for that either.
Okay, so this is Disney Quest Chicago. So themed lighting can also be in location-based entertainment, which is like Disney Quest or Buster and whatever that one's called. And the rides are inside. This is the Astro Blaster. Those are ride vehicles down there where people are controlling it. And the entryway for Disney Quest in Chicago. And this is Club Disney, which was a children's location-based entertainment facility that was first in Thousand Oaks and second Glendale, Arizona. And it lasted about 4 years, but it wasn't doing enough business, so they stopped it. But it was a lot of fun to do this one. And then you get to do things sometimes like outdoor things like Big Thunder Ranch at Disneyland. That's architectural lighting.
Now the home of Star Wars.
I know.
Sorry.
I haven't been back there yet. I'm so sorry it's gone. That used to be a meadow out there. And in the early 80s, we would stand out in the meadow and because it was backstage, and we'd watch the fireworks from there. Yeah. Okay. And then retail shops, little ones and big ones, and Disney stores. This is Disney store, which was at Caesars in Las Vegas. And this is Disney Studios. This is Lights, Camera, Hollywood. So we took what was a set for a movie, and we overlaid like a party on it. So I had lots of moving lights running all the time down Hollywood Boulevard here. I even took an old Luxtrol dimmer board and connected some lights to it so the guests could sit there and run the controls, run the lights. This is Rock and Roller Coaster, the launch. And this is the tunnel going into it. Those are lights that are chasing towards the vehicle, so it'll feel like it's going faster. So this is inside what it looks like for the guest point of view. They had 5 vehicles, 5 different light shows, and 5 different bits of music that were all coordinated. This is what it looks like from the right.
We had a couple of additional questions that came in through the chat while you were sharing some stuff. That was really cool to look at, by the way. Phil was asking if there were any books that you would recommend for people to look at and read.
For theme parks?
For theme parks, or any books that you have read that you felt helped you in your career.
Are there any books on theme park lighting?
There's none that I know of. There's a ton of books on theme parks in general. Some books where people talk about lighting philosophy, that like the some of the books that are about the Imagineers, and you'll get quotes from, I know, Brian, if you were in some of those. I know Joe is in some of those, just quotes. But as far as here's how you do it, I don't know of any.
I don't know of any.
I guess we should write one.
Well, and people hang on to it. Yes, Jen?
I was thinking someone could have done that over the past few months, but we can still write one.
Yeah.
Yeah, people tend to keep their secrets about how they light things because it's pretty competitive.
Okay.
So
That's true.
Yeah. But yeah, there's a lot of books on design for Disney. It used to be Imagineers were just in the background, and they didn't want us to talk about it at all. And the reason was you didn't want to spoil the magic for the guests, so you don't reveal the secrets of the ghosts in the haunted mansion, or that kind of a thing. So there's a lot of closely held information.
What's interesting is that back when I was starting, and I'm coming out of UCLA, and I'm going to go work for Disney. They must have the latest state-of-the-art everything, and they didn't even. And even back then, every decent theater, whether it was educational or not, had some kind of a computerized lighting board. So that's back when they were actually discs that were actually floppy. And I get to Disney and I says, wow, what kind of great control systems do you have? Well, except for special occasions, you had auto transformer dimmers. I said,
your lights were on the Anacon. You're programming your lights with the wrist and the elbow and the.
Oh yeah, that was
nuts.
That was even the best. So the only thing they had to program lights was this thing that looked like a person and it had knobs and buttons all over. That's what they used to.
It turns eye blinks.
The animatronics, and that's what you had no feedback, you had no display, you had no way to record it. So you said, okay, bring the wrist up to like 50%.
But
right, those controls were talking to
red light.
Yeah, they were talking to PLCs, programmable logic cards that were in a rack, just and that's how it was programmed. Or they had little Mole Richardson, if I remember right, auto transformer dimmers that were set in the ride, like I'm thinking Haunted Mansion right now, that were controlling the lights, and they were really lit. A lot of them were little par lights or little Mo Richardson little Fresnel, baby Fresnels, we called them.
There were many moles.
Yeah, and minimals, yes. And fluorescence, if the fluorescence too bright and, it's a blue fluorescent, if it's too bright, take some black electrical tape and run it down the light and it dims it down. It takes the edge off. I mean, it's simple. And I'd literally a coffee can with jagged cutouts and a light bulb in it. I think they're still there in the Haunted Mansion.
I remember, I grew up at Disneyland. I was a kid and I went to Disneyland. I remember the submarine ride, the undersea ride. Well, I just was magic. I thought it was magic. And I got my job at Disneyland. I went there and the studio electricians lit it. It was beautifully lit with, as Paula said, Malibu lights, pars and sometimes cellophane gel taped to them. It was the lowest tech. You could buy every light at your Lowe's back then. And it was beautifully done. I just thought, at Imagineering, I had an expression, we always come up with a high-tech solution to a low-tech problem.
Yes. So you have to remember in the theme parks that if it has to run sometimes 18 hours a day. And if it's in motion, like my first moving lights were in America the Beautiful at Circle Vision that were up on this floating ceiling thing. And it was a servo motor moving them back and forth. And they're just colored, par lamps, right? And it was magic when I first saw it in 1966, I think. It was when I first saw, rides at Disneyland. And they were still there when I started to work there in 1980.
Yeah, I remember when I went on my first, I didn't. It's one of these things that you don't miss. We're going to go back of house at Haunted Mansion and Pirates of the Caribbean. And be here in Glendale at 5:30 in the morning because we got to do all this before the park opens. I says, wow, I'm going to see all the magic. And I was like, really? That's it? That's how they do it? Now, things have gotten a lot more sophisticated since then, but they did some incredible stuff. And it was a guy named Yale Gracie was kind of the special effects guy, and he was the master of old magician tricks, old stage tricks. And they were just very well done, and they put people in the right place at the right time so that it worked. So that's kind of that's the magic is attention to the detail. I mean, in general, the things that all you guys are doing is learn and practice your craft wherever you can do it. Small projects. Some of my favorite projects have been, pretty small projects. I've done some nice big stuff too, but wherever everything you learn. I learned a lot from fun stuff working with light artists, and said, oh, okay, that taught me something. So just be a sponge for all this stuff, and if you're going to get involved with more of the permanent architecture, then try to learn stuff about literally construction and how it works. You don't have to be a professional construction manager, but just learn the trades. You're interfacing with electrical engineers are one of the primary people, and a lot of people think that we're in competition with them, but most electrical engineers that I've ever talked to said, oh my God, I'm so happy there's a lighting designer here, because they're all nuts and bolts. So they want to do that fancy stuff. They're happy to have us do.
Right. And we don't program on like grandmas or hugs for the most part. The most of the theme park attractions are programmed on a laptop.
Yeah.
These days. So, okay. Jake, did you have another question? No.
I was touching a bit earlier on something that you actually said. I was asking, do you recommend moving somewhere and looking for a career in either themed lighting or architecture? I know there's some industries where, if you want to work in New York, you need to move to New York to work on Broadway, or you need to move to LA to work in film. Is there anywhere specifically for themed lighting or architecture that you feel like we should move to have a better chance and just take the risk and just pick up everything and go? Or should we have a job before we we commit full on?
Well, having a job would be good, but you know, the major theme parks are in Los Angeles, Orlando. You know, there's also a lot of regional parks, you know, around. A bunch of Six Flags all over the place. It wouldn't be a bad thing to go to work doing lights at a Six Flags, because you start learning how things work. You know, it would be risky to pack up and move to Los Angeles, but I know people who have done it.
Especially, I'd say, especially right now, given nobody knows where anything is going. But I guess the advantage of being in a Los Angeles or Orlando in particular, if you want to go into the theme park world, is that those are the two major centers in the world where people where companies are that are doing theme park work. So there's a huge what's the word I'm searching for? There's just a lot of people.
It's a target-rich environment.
Yeah,
that's a good one. Thanks, Brian. Target rich environment. I gotta write that down.
In Southern California, it's not just Disney and Universal and Six Flags. It's also Technifex and all of these other companies,
and you know, American Scenic, and a lot of them are spun off from an ex-Disney people, and they were here, and they've rolled out their companies. There's 8 or 10 different little theme park design entities and companies. Your career will be based on no matter where you are, is going to be based on who you know.
Yep.
And having more people to know is going to be better. And where are more people to know? Orlando's a place to know people. Los Angeles is a place to know people. The more people you can interface with, the more get used to collaborating with you, the better your career will go.
Yep.
So
there's an old saying: it's not about who you know; it's about who you know that knows what you know. In other words, you know, that's whole networking thing. So if you a lot of people would say, well, you're not really a wallflower or anything. It says, well, from a personal standpoint, I just assume do all this work and then go out and pull weeds in my garden or do something like that. But I learned especially once I had my own business, is that I need to let people know. I still need to. I've been doing this for a long time. I mean, I have the luxury of saying I could probably live anywhere right now just because I know a lot of people and I stay in touch with people. But you just need to make that choice to get out there. And again, like we said earlier, I think if you want to get into the themed entertainment side of things, join the TEA, the Next Gen group in particular. Yeah. And not just join it, get involved and be involved. And most of their stuff now, just by the nature of the world, is virtual. So it's very easy. It's not like you have to go to Los Angeles or Orlando or wherever the meeting may be. Meetings are all virtual right now, and they have some great stuff going on, including one. I think it's tomorrow, no, Wednesday, with the TEA Masters talking about how to interface between disciplines.
Mm-hmm. And while you have time, now's the time when there might not be jobs. It's the time to learn related things like IES classes. A student from last year got her master's degree in lighting, and boom, the COVID hit. So she applied to go to grad school in architecture. And so she's going to get a master's degree in architecture and match that up with her master's degree in lighting. She is going to be marketable.
Yeah,
there's diversity of skills, a lot of it. Yeah.
This year's a really good year to be
you guys mentioned a few other companies in LA, and that reminded me that I guess you're listening to a lot of people that are talking about Universal and Disney, but the theme park industry is really blown up, especially in the Middle East and China. And there's companies that are still cranking on parks over in China and the Middle East, including Thinkwell, Hedema Group, bunches of others. And so, and I've seen opportunities in those fields. And those are all legitimate big industries right now to start in and stay in. Aside from just Disney and Universal, because I anticipate you won't see hiring from Disney or Universal, at least I mean, into very, very late next year, if not 2022. So it might be good to look elsewhere for the opportunities.
Things in-house right now. We're just coming off of this university. There was a lot of people, Project 304, Epic Universe, and that's about all I can say. Otherwise, I have to tell all of you. There's a lot of people at Universal that thought they had jobs for the next 3 or 4 years because they're going to roll right into construction, and they're all looking for work right now, just like you guys are. So like I said, it's a good time to be a student if you're a student, and take advantage of everything you can do there, because it's not going to stay this way. I've been doing this for a long time, and there's been major downfalls. I don't know if anything as bad as this, but there's slumps, which is why I said I learned there's a lot of other things where you can use your skills that aren't, as theatrical as theme parks. They're not building them so much anymore. I had a great time doing a lot of aquarium work. That was a lot of fun, but you're using the same skill set and the techniques you're using to light anything else. You look at the space and figure out what the story is, and you work to that.
I put links into the chat for the IAS education program and for the TEA Next Gen program. I also had added a link for clubs. One of the things, apparently, because I was looking on the TEA site, that they do is they offer a lot of university clubs. You may be surprised to discover that several of the universities that you are in attendance to have a club and a club member. Get to know that person if you don't already. Oftentimes that list may be out of date to someone who formed the club and then has since graduated. Swoop in and take over that club, man, because all the infrastructure is already done and you don't have to write the Constitution, says the guy who did that with his USITT club when he was in college. I don't see any other questions coming in from anyone, so if you do have any other questions, now would be a great time to get that last question in.
Okay, and I have a recommendation now that we're talking about this, that the TEA Next Gen, if there's, first I heard of this, that there's clubs on university campuses. That being the case, I'm wondering, do they actually invite the designers to come talk to them? Think of all the people who've volunteered for this mentoring, in you're meeting a lot of them. So I wouldn't hesitate to invite them to a TEA student meeting. Okay, well, thank you very much to everybody. Thank you to the presenters. Well done. Appreciate it.
Jake,
and you all have our information now, right?
Jake, did you have a question? I saw your lips moving.
You were saying, Paula. You had mentioned that people come speak at the TEA events, and I just became our TEA president, so now I'm trying to organize all of the different events coming this coming semester, hopefully. So
very cool.
Good for you.
It's great. Yep, that's the kind of proactive thing you need to do. You need to manage your presence and your reputation in this business, and getting yourself out there is the only way to do it. That nobody's going to come looking for you because there are so many people who are looking for them.
Have you run into Marissa? But she's the head of the Next Gen group for the TEA. I first met her when she was in school, I think at SCAD, as a student, and she's like the poster child for somebody that got involved as a student, and now professionally she's even more involved and also helping. Very active in terms of helping people, students really worldwide with the TEA. So, like I said, she's the poster child for how you manage that.
Okay. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Paula.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you to all of us.
Paula.
Yeah, Paula, thank you very much. Thank you to all of our presenters and all of our attendees tonight.
I have one comment I wanted to make just in terms of transitioning from theater to theme park, more permanent architectural work, specifically theme park. And I'm going to use the example of Carl Haas. He does something at ETC, I think, doesn't he?
Yes, Carl is the
that was a joke.
Oh, okay, fair enough. All right.
So Carl worked for me for 12 years. I used to be his longest job that he had. Now he's moved over to ETC being longer. But anyway, I hired Carl when he was 35. He had just moved to Los Angeles. It was literally a month before I hired him because I needed him for a specific project that was like a 2-week gig. And then as it turned out, I had an opening almost after that. And he said, well, this looks like kind of fun. Maybe I could do this. And then he stayed with me for 12 years before he went over before ETC stole him away. No. So Carl had zero experience in architectural lighting. He had a lot of experience in theatrical lighting. And after about 6 months, it clicked along the way. He said, okay, I know how to deal with technical directors. Technical directors, instead of technical directors, you have engineers. They want the same kind of stuff, and they want the same kind of interface. He says, I know how to deal with producers for theater. Okay, in this world, they're called the owners or developers, and I know how to talk to them, and I know what they want. Okay, and now you have creative directors instead of directors. Okay, so once all that clicked, he was off and running. So I think so. The process is it's different, but it's also similar. It's a creative process which kind of has certain steps in a way, no matter what you're doing. And once you make that transition in your head of okay, it's different, but it's still I kind of get it. I've done this before. It's not like I'm learning everything from scratch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the theater hierarchy is sort of similar to what you find in theme parks, because you're going to have, instead of a director, you're going to have an art director, but it's still, you still interface with the set designers or production designers as they call them, and you still have to interface. There's just a lot more detail because it's a permanent installation.
You're also dealing with huge amounts of money, and you just have to, first of all, know what your budget is and work to that. I mean, a simple example, this project we just finished at Universal, and it's a relatively small land, and the lighting, our estimate for what it's going to take to buy the fixtures, not install them, not run wire, not control them, is about $6 million just for light fixtures. So, with the big guys, that's not unusual. That's probably a relatively small amount for a lot of projects.
Yeah, we had about $1 million of high-end equipment in Rock and Roller Coaster of moving lights, just in one ride. Okay, well, thank you, everybody.
Okay.
Thank you, David.
Oh, thank you all. This has been fun.